Hi and welcome. Thank you for joining us today on today's edition of Missions Education Series. My name is David, and I'm excited to start this conversation with you today. And we're discussing something interesting today, doing missions in the digital age. And I'm excited about this, probably because it connects two very intimate parts of me, missions and then technology or digital, what the world is becoming, technology that is driving today. And so it's quite an interesting mix. My anyway, for those of you who have not met me before, my name is David. I'm a missions mobilizer. I used to be a missionary. I am a missionary, and also an entrepreneur. So I combine business and missions, and then my business has happens to be in the space of technology. So somehow I am at the intersection of missions and technology, and our talk today is basically in what ways can we take advantage of emerging or technology that is advancing today to make missions more effective or or to be done better. And let me just back up a little bit. When we talk about missions, a lot of people think that missions is just another buzzword. Hey, mission, something the church does or the missionaries do or something like that. No, missions is not another buzzword. In fact, it's not even a Christian word. It's just a regular English word. And in this context, when we talk about missions, we're talking about the mission of God, something that is God's own project. God had been on this from Genesis. Most of the times when we want to talk about missions, we go to the Great Commission when Jesus said, go into all the world, make disciples of all nations. But missions began far before that. So mission is not just planting churches and doing evangelism. No, mission is an all-encompassing term. Everything that we do in an attempt to make God to be known to the ends of the earth. You see, God has been trying to make his name known to all nations. God is not trying to play a local game. God is trying to be God is a God of all the world. He's a God of all peoples, of all nations. And so that's why he gave the church that global scale mandate that says, go ye into all the world and make disciples of all nations, every tribe and tongue, everywhere people are. When he was living in Acts 1:8, he says, and you shall be my disciples, and you shall be my witnesses, rather, from Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the uttermost part of the earth. And so basically we can say missions began at that point. So missions is not just another buzzword of what some people do or what the church does. Missions is every activity that we do, whatever we do, in order to make God known to people all over the world, not locally, not just in our vicinity, not just in our local cities, but see, missions talks about it at a global scale. When Jesus said, you shall be my witnesses from Jerusalem, Judea, in Samaria, and to the uttermost part of the earth, he gave us a global scale mandate to get his name known, to get word about him to every place on earth. And how do we know that missions is not yet complete? How do we know that the job is not yet done? Revelation 7:9, which is still not fulfilled. It says, and I saw this great multitude of people from every tongue, tribe, people, kindred, and nation on the earth. And so for us, it's very simple. As long as there remains a part of the world, a tribe, a nation, a people, a kindred that have not yet known Christ, mission is not yet complete. And so everything we do in an attempt to make that happen is missions. And so missions began basically, God democratized missions. Before Jesus, God had been working independently, trying to make himself known through people in pockets. But after Jesus came, he gave it to the entire church and said, look, now all power in heaven and on earth is mine. I give it to you. Go into all the world. And so it became a mandate to unleash the gospel to all the world. And so basically we can say the gospel began its journey. Missions began its journey that we know today after the Great Commission. And what was this journey? Getting the gospel to the ends of the earth. And over the last 2,000 plus years, we have seen different eras of how missions was done. So how did it begin? Missions began basically with word of mouth. Initially, the carrier of the gospel had to be physically present, has to go with the gospel and speak it. That was the technology of the day, trekking. So the gospel could not get to Samaria until there was persecution in Jerusalem that made some people go to Samaria. And so as they moved the gospel. And so that was the initial journey, the missions began to do. But you see, in the midst of that, while they were going physically, Peter going to Cornelius to go and preach one-on-one with mouth, someone showed up on the scene and hacked the technology of their day and said, look, we can do this thing better beyond just going and physically talking. And what was the new technology of their day? The Romans were still in power. They had just built roads, so it was easy to send mail and letters. And Paul hacked letter writing. Letter writing was still probably just emerging then as the Romans had built roads. And Paul figured, look, we can use letters to communicate the gospel instead of just having to go physically the way everybody does. And so Paul began to use letters. And you see, that simple step of him taking advantage and maximizing the technology of his day made him probably 10 times more effective than the other apostles in terms of scale. I'm sure that when Paul was writing his letters, he didn't imagine that those letters were going to be preserved this long. That if he didn't think he was writing the Bible. He was just communicating the gospel in letters. And so it kept on moving that way. And the gospel was moving by letters. But then letters had to be physically written and physically delivered. So technology, as it evolved, people who were responsible for spreading the gospel evolved with it. So eventually when the printing press came, it was possible to mass produce scripture and mass produce letters and duplicate things so that people could have it. And so we see that the gospel also scaled on the wings of the printing press. Same thing happened with radio, same thing happened with technology, with television, And so every age that we have seen, whatever technology dominates that age, the gospel finds new expression, new scale. And so depending on where you are listening to me from, or where you're joining us from, I'm speaking from Nigeria. And you see, here in Nigeria, we've seen missions basically indigenously in the last 3 to 4 decades. The last 30, 40 years has when we've seen the rise of local indigenous missions, where Nigerian or African missionaries have been involved in taking the gospel to other nations, to other peoples. And so we have, so to speak, a template that we are used to of how missions is done. But you see, in the last 30, 40 years, the world has changed significantly. And so it's going to be wrong for us. We're going to be disadvantaged not to find new ways of spreading the gospel with the evolving technology of the day. Don't get me wrong. The gospel has not changed. Since Jesus, the gospel has been the same. The gospel is the same. But because people change, everything else changes. Communication changes, transportation changes. And so even the means of spreading the gospel has to be considered in new ways. And so today, basically, my conversation is, what are the technologies of today that we can use, and how do they affect missions? How do they make missions more effective? Of course, today, what are the leading technologies? Basically, internet has come, and the internet is not new. There are already several things being done with the internet. We're talking about live streaming, talking about social media, talking about digital broadcasting. All of those are ways that today's technology is being used to advance missions. And what are the things? I like to also categorize a few of the activities we do to encapsulate that entire concept of missions. So because missions is an all-encompassing activity, it's not just one activity that we do. When we talk about missions, see it more like an enterprise. There are many things we do that involve missions, that comprise missions rather. Talk about recruitment and mobilization. How do we get new people to know about missions? How do we get them to get to the field? How do we get them to be part of what is going on? When you get to the field, what do you do? Talk about evangelism, disciple making. How do we support the missionaries on the field? How do agencies, organizations involved in missions manage their people? These are different segments of missions. And so the question is, are we doing these things the way we've done them 40 years ago? Because apparently 40 years ago was not the way it was done 1,000 years ago. So as technology evolves, missions evolves also. I'm a missionary kid. My parents were missionaries. So I grew up seeing missions done the last 30 years plus in a particular way. And so when I decided to go into missions too, it's possible for me to just want to do things the way I had seen it being done. But I realized that, no, it's going to be counterproductive for us not to maximize the tools and technologies available for us today. And so, not just to talk about theory, I'm going to talk about what are some of these emerging technologies and in what ways do they affect missions today. I don't want to go and dwell on things that I already know. We've talked about social media, I mean, if you are not on social media, of course, it's those are, I expect those to be basics. WhatsApp is a powerful tool for discipleship. I mean, nowadays people run meetings, run small discipleship cell groups on WhatsApp, on Telegram. So we have all this technology of communication. We have social media. If you're not live streaming what you're doing, I mean, you are not maximizing the scale it can get to. If you are only preaching within a room of 100 people and you don't have it recorded and on social media, you've lost an opportunity. That talk you have to 100 people could eventually reach 1 million people by social media. These are things that people did not have 30 years ago. So missions was done in small scale. Now we can scale missions with technology. But you see, there are other new things. There are some frontiers of today's technology. And some of the things I'm going to be talking about today may not yet be done by anybody. But they are just thoughts I'm thinking. I mean, let's just have this. Let's look at the possibilities. Let's push the barriers of what missions can be. You know, some years ago, I organized a lot of mission trips. I take people on short mission trips to visit missionaries and just see how we can be there for 1-2 weeks, play whatever role we can play. And recently, from the city where we live in Uyo, we took a team to Mubi Hills in Adamawa State. It was a 2-day journey. We had about 3 days of riding bikes around the mountains and meeting with the missionaries, meeting with the villagers, teaching in the classroom, going to the missionary clinic, just seeing what things look like. And typically, after these trips, whoever makes this trip, their life changes for good. They come back and they have a different perspective about life. But you see, these trips take time. These trips could be expensive. Some people cannot get time off work to go on these trips. So, what can we do to make more people have this experience? And it's right there in front of us. VR, virtual reality. I also run a school, and we can't take our students to all the places in the world. But this technology called VR, you put on the VR goggles or glasses, and you can port it into another world. I just realized if we can take our grade 5 pupils to Egypt to go and look at the pyramids of Egypt, why can't we take them to Koma Hills? Why can't we take them to Mubi Hills by VR? I mean, recently an organization just came up in Nigeria that took advantage of VR, and they began to tell stories, and they told the story of the Chibok girls in VR. They won international awards. Why? Because they could bring the Chibok experience to people in their homes without leaving your house. You can feel what it felt like to be in Chibok. You can feel the pain of the women whose daughters are not yet back. And look, the church cannot be behind. We need to begin to take advantage of this. Where does it come in? I mean, talking about mobilization and recruitment, just put on a pair of VR glasses and you are in a mission field. You have the live experience. You see what life looks like there. Businesses are taking advantage of it. I mean, you could go to university websites or even secondary school websites today and you can have virtual tours. Why can't we do virtual tours of our mission fields and put it online? People can travel to these fields without having to leave their homes. So I can't take a leave from work, but I can see what that field in Sierra Leone looks like. I can go to Bissau and experience what the missionaries there are doing. I can travel to Mali and experience what they are doing there. Of course, this frontier gives us new challenges too. It means that the tool of the missionary has to change. We have to get the kind of resources and tools to create those kind of things. But see, that is what we're talking about. That is what missions could be like in today's age. So we're not talking conventional anymore. Mission trips could evolve, that people can travel without going to those places. And in fact, with advanced VR, you can even meet with the people. You can even have conversations in a virtual world. I mean, these are things that could be explored. What other technologies are there? Let me not dwell too much on that. Let me just plant seeds in your mind. Talk about apps. Today, there are apps for practically everything you do. So even the missionary on the field, sometimes what scares people about becoming missionaries or going for missions is, I don't know what to do. I can't even preach. I can't talk. I can't do this. But you see, there are apps nowadays that help you to do everything you need to do. My organization has been discussing an app with a particular ministry recently, and they want to just do an app that helps you evangelize. So there are modules, there are walkthroughs, and it just assumes, okay, select where the person you want to preach to falls into. Is he a Muslim who needs to be converted? Is he a Christian who is backsliding? Is he an atheist? Whatever category he falls into, select the category of the person, select your relationship with the person, and then we show you what to do, how to say, how to have that conversation, such that almost anybody, you have the tool to be an evangelist right in your hand. There are apps for everything. My phone is super powerful. In fact, I still keep discovering new things. Just yesterday, I discovered new features of my phone. There are apps that can do everything. We can take advantage of apps for evangelism, for disciple making. In fact, we can disciple people through apps, such that give them this app and it walks them through. You have built the entire curriculum. So today you are watching this, you are viewing this video, you are reading this scripture. Once they do it, it takes them. And maybe that just takes us to the next level, talking about gamification. Today, computer games are becoming everything. Kids are building games. Games are becoming addictive. Have you ever asked yourself, how is ISIS recruiting? Have you ever asked yourself, how are terrorist organizations recruiting? In case you want to know, maybe you should go and check some of the games you find online. Some of them have built their entire recruitment process into a game. When you start playing the game, they are not only working on your mind, they are training you, they are psyching you to the point that by the time you get to a particular level in the game, you don't know when you are applying to go and join them, and because you've basically been fighting the war virtually. Now you want to go and join them on the field. We could gamify these things. We could use gamification. I mean, okay, let me not speak too much grammar. It's simply gamification means breaking down the process into more like games where you get a point for every module you cross. So start the process. When you get this, you get points. You get this, you get points. So it feels like you are playing a game, but we're actually walking you through a process. A discipleship process can be gamified. Missionary training process can be gamified. So we've built the modules into apps and games that enable us to walk people through. And that way, it looks non-threatening. But you see, we need to fill people's minds with the gospel. We need to fill people's minds with the idea of what they could do. And it's going to be foolish of us not to take advantage of today's technologies to do these things. What else is there? Have we talked about language technology? I mean, today language is, there are technologies that make languages look like you could have conversations with people in a different language and you don't know a word of that language. Simply type your text in your language and it translates it to a new language and delivers to the person in his language. In fact, I learned that there are even advanced tools that does live voice translation. So I'm speaking to you in English and you are hearing me in Spanish or Italian. It's almost crazy, unbelievable. But see, these are the things that technology has given us. These technologies are neutral. They are neither good nor bad. Let's not say it's of the devil. No, it's what we do with them that matters. We can take advantage of them. So you could build resources, missionary resources in English and duplicate them to several languages. Just go to Google Translate is the easiest of them, free and cheap. Just copy your text, paste it there, and it gives you, and because I speak a couple of languages, I've used Google Translate before, and I can vouch for their near accuracy. Sometimes it could be very accurate. So sometimes I'm chatting with my French colleagues, and I say, okay, let me just verify what I want to say. And I've said it in my mind, or I've written it down in French, copy the English, paste it in French, and it gives me the same. I'm like, oh, these guys they've really optimized their algorithms. Translation technology is super. We can take advantage of it for the gospel, for missions. What else is there? Several other technologies. Video and animations. I really feel that we have not yet maximized what we can do with video and animation. Animation particularly. I mean, you don't need to be physically present. Look, you're listening to me now and we're in different parts of the world. Everybody's in his home, but we're having a conversation. Same way, we can have a conversation with anybody about anything, anywhere in the world. And it's quite exciting. Many years ago, if you want to become a missionary in any agency, they ask you have to come for training. The minimum mission training I used to know of is 1 year, whether it's CAPRO, CMF, CDM, any training, 1 year on site. So you have to shut down whatever you're doing, go to sites or go to their mission school, sit down there for a year and train to become a missionary. Resource persons have to come and meet you there. Some of these resource persons are missionaries in their fields who are traveling from different places to come to the mission base to train missionaries. Hey, who needs to do that nowadays? Video. Do your teaching on video. In fact, right now, one of our organizations is running a mission training that is currently going as I speak. It's called the Life School. And the entire module is on video. The students are there, they play the video and then discuss it. There's a physical or resident trainer who follows up every video and gives them backup and just helps them to contextualize it. But see, these are technologies that have made life simple. The trainer could be anywhere in the world, do your video, and you are impacting lives and training people. What other things can we do with technology today? I mean, sometimes I just try to look at what new technology has just arrived And to what area of missions can we connect this? For example, look at the rise of financial technology, fintech, borderless payments. You can make payments anywhere, everywhere. In the last few years, especially maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, making payments to missionaries out of this country became a nightmare. We had passed this stage before, but I don't know whatever happened in the economy of our nation. Some of those systems were shut down, and sending money. In fact, we have missionaries in Cameroon, we have missionaries in Chad that we used to send money to. It got to a point that we couldn't move money. So what we had to do was create Nigerian dollar accounts in our names as missionaries, get dollar cards, and give missionaries those cards. So when we want to send them money, we put money in those accounts in Nigeria, and they can withdraw it with our ATM cards. Those cards are dedicated for nations. So we have probably one missionary in a country who has access to the money. So we draw the money there, and then within the country locally, you can circulate it. But you see, nowadays, there are technologies that are coming that are making these things even easier. It doesn't have to be that stressful anymore. So we can look at what are these emerging products that these financial technology companies are giving to us, and how do we maximize them and take advantage of them for fundraising, for support. People can support missions from anywhere. We did a GoFundMe the other time, and people were supporting us from Germany, from Asia. And the project was somewhere in a remote part of Africa. These are technologies. So sometimes you don't even need to know the people. You need to meet the people. Just take advantage of what technology can do. And then maybe I should talk about one more, talking about the rise of micro-technology. Many years ago, the computers used to be very big, but with every passing year, the computers become smaller and smaller and smaller. I think that's an advantage. We can fit in more content into smaller spaces. You can now have microchips or SD cards that look very small, but could even be in terabytes. That's massive. Meaning you can put an entire library of training, resources, and everything into a small chip and ship it to anywhere in the world. So these are technologies that we are at the edge of today. These are things that I think that as people who are involved in missions, and you see, what excites me the most about technology in today's world is that it has redefined the missionary. So the idea or the concept of who a missionary is changes. Right now, I believe that there has never been a time in the history of missions where missions has needed creatives like now, because it's becoming a function of content. I'm in the studio right now, I'm talking to you, somebody's setting up the technology for me. These are people who are involved in missions. So you can actually do missions with your job. We could have people, in fact, we need people today who are going to sign up to missionaries, but who are just media guys, developers, animators, who don't have to leave the city, but they are creating the tools and the resources that missionaries who are on the field are using to simplify their work. That is what excites me the most about the digital age. That's the concept of missionary. I live in a city, I run businesses, but I tell people I'm a missionary, and they wonder, David, which one you be safe now? How are you a missionary? We see you every day. Look, and I tell them I'm probably more of a missionary than many people who live on the field, because I have the things that we are able to do with technology has pushed the limits of the definition of who a missionary is. So we need to break the stereotype. We could have somebody, all he does is creating animated cartoons, but that person is properly a missionary. Everything he's doing is how do we get Jesus known to these people. Recently, we had this book for mobilization called the Unreached Coloring Book. We're trying to teach kids about nations, because we need to start reaching the next generation. And so we need people who are building children resources to help children understand missions. These are opportunities. These are openings. These are things. So we need illustrators, people who can create coloring books, cartoons that children can color. Those are not regular skills. Conventional missionaries don't know how to do those things. We need people who are not regular conventional missionaries who tell themselves, this is the role I am called to play in missions. And so, as we push this conversation forward, we need to start asking the question, whatever comes up, whatever new tech comes up, as travel evolved and made missions simpler, as education evolved and made missions easier, we need to see every new thing that comes up. How does it make the gospel spread better? And let me end with this. The Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, when Jesus said in verse 18 and 19, go ye into all the world, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, teaching them to observe all that I have taught you. Jesus told us what to do, but he did not tell us the how. He left us to figure out the how. Meaning, how you will do it is up to you. What you need to do is what? Make disciples of all nations. Meaning, wherever human beings are on the face of the earth, go there, tell them about me, get them to know me, to live like me. It's quite interesting to hear that Jesus did not say plant churches. He did not even say convert religions. He said make disciples. And so, however we do it, whatever we do that makes people become disciples of Jesus, that is the Great Commission. When churches are the most effective ways to make disciples, plant churches. But where churches are not going to work, he did not say plant churches. So we need to break that stereotype that when I say I'm going as a missionary, I have to go and be a pastor, plant a church. It does not matter what title I carry. Actually, in many parts of the world today, a more effective way of making disciples are no longer churches, but schools. And it's interesting. If you go to a place today and you plant a church and you're a pastor, number one, there are many things that are already stacked up against you. But let's talk about even the scale of or speed of discipleship. Church meets probably 2 or 3 times a week. Let's say you meet for 2 hours, 3 times a week. That's 6 hours a week of contact with the people to make disciples, to teach them God's word. But imagine that you have a school or you go there as a teacher and you have a classroom of 25 young kids and they meet with you 6 hours every day. Ask yourself, who has a better chance of making disciples faster, the pastor or the teacher? The teacher spends 6 hours every day for a week. The pastor spends 6 hours a week. So you see that we need to start thinking beyond the conventional ideas that drive missions. I see these things because I grew up seeing missions done conventionally. My parents are missionaries, they still are missionaries. And I have been a missionary myself. And I today do many other things to make missions work better than the way I met it. And so we're constantly iterating. What new things can we do? What new things can we try? And how do we make these things better? And I pray that as we have these conversations, as we discuss further, we will be able to stretch our minds and open our minds and say, in what ways does the technology of today enable us make the kingdom grow bigger? Don't forget, we are supposed to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. How we do it is for us to figure out. What we need to do is what? Take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Thank you for listening to me today, and God bless you.